梁歌制作，高老头，作者巴尔扎克。离不了这个中年人跟那个大学生，一个是精力充沛，一个是长得俊美，他无意之间受到他们吸引。
Produced by Liang Gu, Petro Goriot, author, Balzac. I can't live without this middle-aged man and that college student. One is energetic, the other is handsome, and she is attracted to them unintentionally.
可是那两位好似一个也没有想到他，虽说天道无常，他可能一变而为陪嫁富裕的对象，并且那些人也不愿意推敲旁人自称为的苦难是真是假，除了漠不关心之外。
But neither of those two people seemed to have thought of her. Although the fate was unpredictable, she might suddenly become a wealthy dowry partner. Moreover, those people are not willing to scrutinize whether the suffering others claim is true or false. Except for indifference.
他们还因为彼此境况不同而提防人家。他们知道没有力量减轻旁人的痛苦，而且平时叹苦经叹得太多了，互相劝慰的话也早已说尽，像老夫妻一样的无话可谈。
They are also wary of others because of their different circumstances. They know that they have no power to alleviate the suffering of others, and they lament too much and have already exhausted their words of comfort to each other. Like an old couple, they have nothing to talk about.
他们之间的关系只有机械的生活，等于没有上游的齿轮在那里互相推动。他们可以在路上遇到一个瞎子而头也不回地走过，也可以无动于衷地听人家讲一桩苦难。
Their relationship is a mechanical one, unoiled gears pushing each other. They can meet a blind man on the road and pass by without looking back, or they can listen indifferently to someone's story of suffering.
甚至把死亡看作一个悲惨局面的解决，饱经忧患的结果，大家对最惨痛的苦难都冷了心。这些伤心人中最幸福的还算福盖太太，高高在上的管着这所私人救济院。
Death is even seen as the solution to a tragic situation. As a result of suffering, everyone becomes cold-hearted about the worst suffering. The happiest of these sad people was Madame Walker, who was in charge of this private almshouse from a high position.
唯有福盖太太觉得那个小园是一座笑盈盈的树林，事实上，静寂和寒冷、干燥和潮湿，使园子像大草原一样广漠无垠。唯有为他这所黄黄的、阴沉沉的、到处是瘴苔的铜绿味的屋子。
Only Madame Walker felt that the small garden was a smiling forest. In fact, the silence and cold, dryness and humidity made the garden as vast as a prairie. Only for her, this yellow, gloomy house with the patina smell of account desks everywhere.
才充满愉快。这些牢房是属于他的，他喂养那批终身做苦役的囚犯，他们尊重他的威权。以他所定的价目，这些可怜虫在巴黎哪儿还能找到充足而卫生的饭食？
It's full of joy. These cells were hers. She fed the group of prisoners who served as slaves for life, and they respected her authority. At the price she was charging, where else in Paris would these poor bastards find adequate and wholesome food?
以及即使不能安排的高雅舒适，至少可以收拾得干干净净的房间。哪怕他做出极不公道的事来，人家也只能忍受，不敢叫屈。整个社会的分子在这样一个集团内当然应有尽有。
And a room that, if not elegantly and comfortably arranged, could at least be tidy? Even if she does extremely unfair things, others can only endure it without complaining. Of course, all elements of society can be found in such a group.
不过是具体而微罢了。像学校或交际场中一样，饭桌上18个客人中间有一个专受白眼的可怜虫，老给人家打哈哈的出气筒。欧也纳·特拉斯蒂涅住到第2年开头。
It's just specific and subtle. Just like in school or social gatherings, among the 18 guests at the dinner table, there is a poor guy who always gets looked at and is always used as a punching bag for others. Eugene de Rastignac stayed there until the beginning of the second year.
发觉在这个还得住上2年的环境中，最堪注目的便是那个出气筒，从前做面条生意的高里奥老头。要是画家来处理这个对象，一定会像史家一样，把画面上的光线集中在他头上。
I found that in this environment where I had to live for another 2 years, the most eye-catching person was the punching bag, old man Goriot, who used to be in noodle business. If a painter were to deal with this subject, he would definitely focus the light on his head like a historian.
半含仇恨的轻蔑，带着轻视的虐待，对苦难毫不留情的态度，为什么加之于一个最老的房客身上呢？难道他有什么可笑的或是古怪的地方，比恶习更不容易原谅吗？
Why was contempt half hateful, contemptuous abuse, merciless attitude towards suffering, inflicted on the oldest tenant? Is there something funny or eccentric about him that is less forgivable than his bad habits?
这些问题牵涉到社会上许多暴行。也许人的天性就喜欢教那些为了谦卑、为了懦弱，或者为了满不在乎而忍受一切的人忍受一切。我们不是都喜欢把什么人或物做牺牲品？
These issues involve many atrocities in society. Perhaps human nature likes to teach those who endure everything for the sake of humility, cowardice, or indifference to endure everything. Not all of us like to sacrifice someone or something.
来证明我们的力量吗？ 最幼弱的生物像儿童就会在大冷天按人家的门铃，或者提着脚尖在崭新的建筑物上涂写自己的名字。69岁的高老头在1813年上结束了买卖。
To prove our strength? The youngest and weakest creatures are like children, who ring doorbells on cold days or scribble their names on brand new buildings on tiptoe. The 69-year-old Goriot ended the business in 1813.
住到福盖太太这儿来，他先住古的太太的那套房间，每年付1200法郎膳宿费，那气派仿佛多5个路易少5个路易都无所谓。福盖太太预收了一笔补偿费。
Come and stay with Madame Walker. He first lived in Madame Gou's apartment, paying 1,200 francs a year for board and lodging, as if it didn't matter if there were 5 louis more or 5 louis less. Madame Walker received a compensation fee in advance.
把那3间屋子整新了一番，添置一些骑马家具，例如黄布窗帘、羊毛绒面的安乐椅、几张胶画，以及连乡村酒店都不要的湖壁纸。高老头那时还被尊称为高里奥先生。
The 3 rooms were renovated and some basic furniture was added, such as yellow cloth curtains, woolen suede easy chairs, a few glue paintings, and wallpapers that even country hotels did not need. At that time, old man Goriot was still respectfully known as Mr. Goriot.
也许房东看他那种满不在乎的阔气，以为他是个不知世面的冤大头。高里奥搬来的时候香拢充实，里外服装、被褥行头都很讲究，表示这位高老的商人很会享福。
Perhaps the landlord saw his nonchalant generosity and thought he was a man who didn't know the market and was taken advantage of. When Goriot moved in, the boxes and cages were well stocked, and the clothes and bedding were very particular, indicating that this retired businessman was very happy.
18件2号荷兰西部衬衫，叫福盖太太探赏不至。面条商还在纱颈围上扣着2只大金刚钻别针，中间系一条小链子，愈加显出衬衣料子的细节。他平时穿一套宝蓝衣服。
18 No. 2 Dutch muslin shirts made Madame Walker admire them with admiration. The noodle seller also fastened 2 large diamond brooches on the gauze neckband with a small chain in the middle, which further highlighted the fineness and cleanliness of the shirt material. He usually wears a royal blue suit.
每天换一件雪白的细格布背心，下面鼓起一个滚圆的大肚子，在那儿吸动，把一件挂有各色坠子的粗金链子震动得一蹦一跳。鼻烟匣也是金的，里面有一个装满头发的小圆匣子。
Every day he changed into a snow-white fine plaid vest, with a big round belly bulging underneath, making a thick gold chain with various pendants jump. The snuff box was also of gold, and contained a small round box filled with hair.
仿佛他还有风流艳事呢。听到房东太太说他风流，他嘴边立刻浮起笑容，好似一个小财主听见旁人称赞他的爱物。他的柜子，他把这个名词跟穷人一样念别了音，装满许多家用的银器。
It seems that he still has romantic affairs. When the landlady said that he was romantic, a smile immediately appeared on his lips, just like a little rich man who heard others complimenting his beloved possessions. His cupboard, he pronounced the word with a poor pronunciation, was filled with a lot of household silverware.
福盖寡妇殷勤地帮他整东西时，不由得眼睛发亮。什么勺子、羹匙、石器、油瓶、汤碗、盘子、镀金的早餐用具，以及美丑布衣，有相当分量，他舍不得放手的东西。
Widow Walker's eyes couldn't help but shine as she helped him arrange things diligently. There were spoons, utensils, oil bottles, soup bowls, plates, gilded breakfast utensils, and other beautiful and ugly things that were of considerable weight, and he couldn't bear to let them go. Thing.
这些礼物使他回想起家庭生活中的大事。他抓起一个盘，跟一个盖上有2只大哥亲嘴的小钵，对福盖太太说：“这是那人在我们结婚的第1周年送我的。”
These gifts reminded him of important events in his family's life. He grabbed a plate, a small bowl with 2 big pigeons kissing on the lid, and said to Madame Walker, "My wife gave this to me on our first wedding anniversary."
好心的女人为此花掉了做姑娘时候的积蓄。哦，太太，要我动手翻土都可以。这些东西我绝不放手，谢天谢地，这一辈子总可以天天早上用这个钵喝咖啡，我不用发愁。
The kind-hearted woman spent all her savings as a girl on this. Oh, ma'am, I can turn over the soil if you want, but I won't let go of these things. Thank God. I can always use this bowl to drink coffee every morning for the rest of my life. I don't have to worry.
有现成饭吃的日子还长哩。末了，福盖太太那双喜鹊眼还瞥见一叠公债票，约略加起来，高里奥这个好人每年有8000到1万法郎的进款。从那天起，公府冷家的姑奶奶。
There will be a long time before there is ready-made food to eat. Finally, Madame Walker's magpie eyes also caught a glimpse of a stack of public debt notes. In total, Goriot, a good man, has an annual income of 8,000 to 10,000 francs. From that day on, the Gonfler family ante.
年纪48而只承认39的福盖太太打起主意来了。虽然高里奥的里眼角向外翻转，又是虚肿又是往下掉，他常常要用手去抹， 他觉得这副相貌还体面，讨人喜欢。
Madame Walker, who was 48 and only admitted to being 39, had made up her mind. Although Goriot's inner corners were turned outwards, swollen and falling down, and he often had to wipe them with his hands, she felt that his appearance was decent and endearing.
他的多肉而突出的腿肚子，跟他的方鼻子一样，暗示他具备福盖寡妇所重视的若干优点。而那张满月式的、又天真又吃似的脸，也从旁证实，福盖寡妇理想中的汉子应当精壮结实。
His fleshy and protruding calves, like his square nose, suggested that he had some of the advantages that Widow Walker valued, and his face, like a full moon, innocent and stupid, also confirmed it from the side. Widow Vuguet's ideal man should be strong and strong.
能把全副精神花在感情方面。每天早晨，多益学校的理发匠来替高里奥把头发铺粉，梳成鸽翅式，在他的低额角上留出5个尖角，十分好看。虽然有点土气，他穿扮得十分整齐。
Able to spend all your energy on feelings. Every morning, the barber from the Polytechnic school came to powder Goriot's hair and comb it into a dove-wing style, leaving 5 sharp corners on his low forehead, which was very beautiful. Although a bit rustic, he was dressed very neatly.
倒起烟来，老师一大堆，吸进鼻孔的神气表示他从来不抽烟壶里会缺少马古巴。所以高里奥搬进福盖太太家的那一天，他晚上睡觉的时候便盘算怎样离开福盖的坟墓。
There was always a lot of smoke when he poured it out, and the way he inhaled it into his nostrils showed that he never worried about the lack of maguba in the pot. So on the day when Goriot moved into Madame Walker's house, she was planning how to leave Walker's tomb when she went to bed at night.
到高里奥身上去再生，他把这个念头放在浴火上烧烤，仿佛烤一只涂满油脂的竹鸡。再叫把公寓出盘跟这位布尔乔亚的精华结合，成为本区中一个显要的太太，替穷人募捐。
To be reborn in Goriot, she roasted the idea on the fire of desire, as if roasting a bamboo chicken covered with grease. Marry again, put the apartment on the market, combine with this bourgeois essence, and become a prominent wife in the district, raising money for the poor.
星期日逛叙阿西、苏阿西、香第一，随心所欲的上戏院做包厢，无需再等房客在7月中弄几张作家的赠券送他。总而言之，他做着一般巴黎小市民的黄金梦。
On Sundays, she visited Assy, So Assy, and Chantilly. She went to the theater and sat in the boxes as she pleased, without having to wait for the tenants to get some author coupons for her in mid-July. In short, she was doing the gold of ordinary Parisian citizens. Dream.
他有一个童子积起来的4万法郎，对谁也没有提过。当然，他觉得以财产而论，自己还是一个出色的对象。至于其他，我还怕比不上这家伙。想到这儿，他在床上翻了个身。
She had 40,000 francs, penny by penny, and told no one about it. Of course, she felt that she was an excellent candidate in terms of property. As for the rest, I'm afraid I won't be able to compare with this guy. Thinking of this, she turned over on the bed.
仿佛有心表现一下美妙的身段，所以胖子谢尔维每天早上看见褥子上有个陷下去的窝。从这天起，约莫有3个月，福盖寡妇利用高里奥先生的理发匠在装扮上画了点心血。
As if he wanted to show off his beautiful figure, Fat Sylvie saw a sunken hole in the mattress every morning. For about 3 months from this day, Widow Walker took advantage of Goriot's barber to put some effort into her appearance.
推说公寓里来往的客人都很体面，自己不能不修饰的和他们相称。他想出种种玩意儿要调整房客，声言从今以后只招待在各方面看来都是最体面的人。遇到生客上门，
He said that the guests coming and going in the apartment were very respectable, and he had to dress up to match them. She devised all kinds of tricks to adjust the tenants, and declared that from now on she would only entertain the most respectable people in all respects. I met a stranger coming to my door.
他便宣传说，高里奥先生，巴黎最有名望、最有地位的商界巨头，特别选中他的公寓。他分发传单，上面大书特书，福盖宿舍，后面写着拉丁区最悠久、最知名的包饭公寓，风景优美。
She then advertised that Mr. Goriot, the most famous and influential business tycoon in Paris, had specially chosen her apartment. She handed out flyers, which read in large words, Walker's dormitory, and on the back it said, the oldest and most famous apartment with meals in the Latin Quarter. Beautiful scenery.
可以远眺高博冷盆地，那是要在4层楼上远眺的，园庭优雅，菩提树夹道成荫。另外还提到环境清净、空气新鲜的话。这份传单替他招来了特朗贝梅尼伯爵夫人，36岁。
You can overlook the Gobelin Basin, that can only be seen from the 4th floor, with elegant garden pavilions and shady paths lined with linden trees. In addition, it was mentioned that the environment was quiet and the air was fresh. This flyer recruited Countess de Rambamini for her, 36 years old.
丈夫是一个死在战场上的将军，她以殉职军人的寡妇身份等公家结算抚恤金。福盖太太把饭菜弄得很精美，客厅里生活有6个月之久，传单上的诺言都严格履行，甚至花了她的血本。
Her husband was a general who died on the battlefield, as the widow of a fallen soldier, she was waiting for the government to settle her pension. Madame Walker cooked the meals beautifully, had a fire in the drawing room for 6 months, and kept the promises in the leaflets to the letter, even at her own expense.
伯爵夫人称福盖太太为亲爱的朋友，说预备把特·福马朗男爵夫人和上校毕格阿索伯爵的寡妇，他的2个朋友介绍到这儿来。他们住在马来区一家比福盖公寓贵得多的宿舍里。
The Countess called Madame Walker her dear friend, and said that she was going to introduce to her 2 friends, the Baroness de Four Mainland and the Colonel, Count Picasso, who lived in a small house in the Marais. In the much more expensive dormitory of the apartment Walker.
租期快要满了，依照陆军部各司署把手续办完之后，这些太太都是很有钱的。可是他说，衙门里的公事老不结束。2个寡妇晚饭之后一起上楼，到福盖太太房里谈天，喝着果子酒。
The lease is almost up. Once the various departments of the War Department have completed the procedures, these ladies will all be very wealthy. But, she said, official business in the Yamen never ends. After dinner, the 2 widows went upstairs together to talk and drink cider in Madame Walker's room.
嚼着房东刘备自用的糖果，特·朗贝梅尼夫人大为赞成房东太太对高里奥的看法，认为却是高见。据说她一进门就猜到房东太太的心思，觉得高里奥是个十全十美的男人。啊
Chewing the candy that the landlord had reserved for his own use. Mrs. de Rambemini greatly agreed with the landlady's opinion of Goriot and thought it was indeed a good idea. It is said that she guessed the landlady's thoughts as soon as she entered the door. She felt that Goriot was a perfect man. Ah.
亲爱的太太，福盖寡妇对他说，他一点毛病都没有，保养得挺好，还能给一个女人许多快乐里。伯爵夫人对福盖太太的装束很热心地贡献意见，认为还不能跟她的抱负配合。
My dear madam, said Widow Walker to her, there is nothing wrong with him, he is well maintained, and he can give a woman a lot of happiness. The Countess expressed her enthusiastic opinions on Madame Walker's dress, which she thought did not suit her ambitions.
你得武装起来，她说。仔细计算一番之后，2个寡妇一同上王宫市场的木廊，买了一顶饰有羽毛的帽子和一顶便帽。伯爵夫人又带她的朋友上小耶纳德铺子挑了一件衣衫和一条披肩。
You must be armed, she said. After careful calculation, the 2 widows went to the wooden gallery of the palace market together and bought a hat with feathers and a skullcap. The Countess took her friend to the little Yenader, picked out a dress and a shawl.
武装买齐，杂数叮当之后，寡妇真像煨牛肉饭店的招牌。她却觉得自己大为改观，添加了不少风韵，便很感激伯爵夫人，虽是生性吝啬，也硬要伯爵夫人接受一顶20法郎的帽子。
After buying all the weapons and bundling them, the widow really looked like the signboard of a beef stew restaurant. However, she felt that she had greatly changed her appearance and had added a lot of charm, so she was very grateful to the Countess. Although she was stingy by nature, she insisted on the Countess accepting a 20-franc hat.
实际是打算托她去探探高里奥，替自己吹嘘一番。朗贝梅尼夫人很乐意当这个差事，跟老面条商做了一次密谈，想笼络他，把他勾引过来派自己的用场。可是种种的诱惑。
In fact, he planned to ask her to explore Goriot and brag for himself. Mrs. Lambamini was very happy to take on this job, and had a secret conversation with the old noodle seller, hoping to win over him and seduce him to use it for her own purposes, but all kinds of temptations.
对方即使不曾明白拒绝，至少是怕羞的厉害。他的仓促把他气走了。我的宝贝，他对他的朋友说，你在这个家伙身上什么都挤不出来的。他那疑神疑鬼的态度简直可笑，这是个吝啬鬼。
Even if the other party did not refuse clearly, at least he was extremely shy. His vulgarity drove her away. My dear, she said to her friend, you can't get anything out of this guy. His suspicious attitude is ridiculous. He's a miser.
笨蛋，蠢货，只能讨人厌。高里奥先生和朗贝梅尼太太会面的经过，甚至使伯爵夫人从此不愿再同他住在一幢楼里。第二天他走了，把6个月的膳宿费都忘了。
Idiots, idiots, can only be annoying. The meeting between Mr. Goriot and Mrs. Rambemini even made the Countess no longer want to live in the same building with him. She left the next day, spending 6 months' board and lodging expenses. Forgot.
留下的破衣服只值5法郎。福盖太太拼命寻访，总没法在巴黎打听到一些关于特朗贝梅尼伯爵夫人的消息。她常常提起这件倒霉事儿，埋怨自己过于相信人家。
The rags left behind were worth only 5 francs. Madame Walker searched desperately, but could not find out anything about Countess de Rambemini in Paris. She often mentioned this unfortunate incident and complained that she trusted others too much.
其实她的疑心病比猫还要重，但她像许多人一样，老是提防亲近的人，而遇到第一个陌生人就上当。这种古怪的，也是实在的现象，很容易在一个人的心里找到根源。也许有些人
In fact, she is more suspicious than a cat, but like many people, she is always wary of people close to her and is fooled by the first stranger she meets. This weird, but also real phenomenon can easily find its origin in a person's heart. Maybe some people.
在共同生活的人身上再也得不到什么，把自己心灵的空虚暴露之后，暗中觉得受着旁人严厉的批判，而那些得不到的恭维，他们又偏偏极感需要，或者自己素来没有的优点。
They can no longer get anything from the people they live with. After exposing the emptiness in their hearts, they secretly feel that they are being severely criticized by others, and for the compliments they cannot get, they feel that they need it, or they have never had it. Advantage.
竭力想显得具备，因此他们希望争取陌生人的敬重或感情，顾不得将来是否会落空。更有一等人天生势利，对朋友或亲近的人绝对不行方便，因为那是他们的义务，没有报酬的。
They strive to appear qualified, therefore, they hope to win the respect or affection of strangers regardless of whether they will fail in the future. There is also a class of people who are naturally snobbish and will never be inconvenient to their friends or people close to them, because that is their obligation and there is no reward.
不比替陌生人效劳，可以让自尊心满足一下，所以在感情圈内同他们离得越近的人，他们越不爱；离得越远，他们越殷勤。福盖太太显然兼有上面两种性格，骨子里都是鄙陋的、虚伪的。
It is no better than serving strangers to satisfy their self-esteem. Therefore, the closer they are to people in their emotional circle, the less they love them, the further away they are, the more attentive they are. Madame Walker obviously has both of the above personalities. She is both despicable and hypocritical at heart.
恶劣的，我要是在这儿，福托冷说，包你不会吃这个亏。我会揭破那个女骗子的面皮，叫她当场出彩。那种嘴脸我是一望而知的，像所有心路不宽的人一样。
Vile. If I were here, said Vautrin, I guarantee you wouldn't suffer this loss. I would expose that female liar and teach her to shine on the spot. I know that kind of face at a glance. Like all people with a narrow mind.
福盖太太从来不能站在事情之外推究她的原因，她喜欢把自己的错处推在别人头上。受了那次损失，她认为老师的面条商是罪魁祸首，并且据她自己说，从此死了心。
Madame Walker could never stand outside an event and speculate on its causes. She likes to blame others for her faults. After suffering that loss, she believed that the honest noodle seller was the culprit, and according to herself, she gave up her heart.
当她承认一切的挑引和搔首弄姿都归无用之后，她马上猜到了原因，以为这个房客像她所说的另有所欢。事实证明，她那个美丽动人的希望只是一场空梦。
When she admitted that all the teasing and flirting were in vain, she immediately guessed the reason, thinking that the tenant was interested in something else as she said. Her beautiful hopes proved to be an empty dream.
在这家伙身上是什么都挤不出来的，正如伯爵夫人那句一针见血的话，他倒像是个内行呢。福盖太太此后敌视的程度，当然远过于先前有意的程度。仇恨的原因并非为了他的爱情。
Nothing can be squeezed out of this guy, as the Countess said to the point. She seems to be an expert. Madame Walker's subsequent hostility was certainly far greater than her previous friendship. The reason for hatred is not for her love,
而是为了希望的破灭。个人向感情的高峰攀登，可能中途休息，从怨恨的险坡往下走，就难得留步了。然而高里奥先生是他的房客，寡妇不能不纳着受伤的自尊心，不让爆发。
but for the destruction of hope. When an individual climbs to the peak of emotion, he may rest midway. When descending from the dangerous slope of resentment, it is difficult to stop. However, Mr. Goriot was her tenant, and the widow had to suppress her wounded pride from exploding.
把失望以后的长吁短叹藏起来，把报复的念头闷在肚里，好似修士受了院长的气，逢到小人要发泄感情，不问是好感是恶感，总是不断的玩小手段的。那寡妇凭着女人的脚快。
He hid his sighs after disappointment and kept his thoughts of revenge in his stomach, just like a monk who was angry with the abbot and wanted to vent his feelings when he met villains, regardless of whether he liked or disliked them, and he always resorted to small tricks. The widow relied on woman's cunning.
想出许多暗中捉弄的方法，折磨他的仇人。他先取消公寓里添加出来的几项小节目，用不着什么小黄瓜跟球鱼了，都是上当的东西。他恢复旧章的那天早晨，这样吩咐希尔维。
She came up with many secret tricks to torture her enemies. She started by canceling several small programs that had been added to the apartment. There's no need for cucumbers and amberjacks. They're all deceived things, she told Sylvie that morning when she restored the old rules.
可是高里奥先生自奉菲薄，正如一般白手成家的人，早年不得已的俭省已经成为习惯。素羹或是肉汤，加上一盘蔬菜，一向是，而且永远就该是他最称心的晚餐。
But Mr. Goriot prides himself on being humble, and like most people who start a family from scratch, the forced frugality in his early years has become a habit. Vegetarian soup, or broth, and a plate of vegetables had always been, and always should be, his most satisfying dinner.
因此，福盖太太要折磨他的房客极不容易，他简直无所谓嗜好，也就没法跟他为难。遇到这样一个无懈可击的人，他觉得无可奈何，只能瞧不起他，把他对高里奥的敌意感染别的房客。
Therefore, it was extremely difficult for Madame Walker to torture her tenant. He simply had no hobbies, so she could not embarrass him. Meeting such an impeccable man, she felt helpless but to look down on him and infect the other tenants with her hostility towards Goriot.
而他们为了好玩，竟然帮着他出气。第一年将近，寡妇对他十分猜疑，甚至在心里思忖：这个富有7、8千法郎进款的商人，银器和饰物的精美不下于富翁的外室，为什么住到这儿来？
And just for fun, they actually helped her vent her anger. At the end of the first year, the widow was very suspicious of him, and even thought to herself, why does this businessman, who has an income of 7,000 to 8,000 francs, and whose silverware and ornaments are as exquisite as the rich man's outer room, live here?
只付一笔在他财产比例上极小的善诉费。这第一年的大半时期，高里奥先生每星期总有1、2次在外面吃晚饭，随后不知不觉改为1个月2次。高里奥大爷那些甜蜜的约会。
Just pay a small fee for board and lodging that is a tiny proportion of his wealth. For most of the first year, Mr. Goriot had dinner out once or twice a week, then, without realizing it, he had dinner out twice a month. Uncle Goriot's sweet dates.
对福盖太太的利益配合得太好了，所以他在家用餐的习惯越来越正常，福盖太太不能不生气。这种改变被认为，一方面由于他的财产慢慢减少，同时也由于他故意跟房东为难。
He was too cooperative with Madame Walker's interests, so his habit of dining at home became more and more normal, and Madame Walker couldn't help but be angry. This change is believed to be due partly to the gradual reduction of his property, but also to his deliberate efforts to embarrass his landlord.
小人许多最可比的习惯中间，有一桩是以为别人跟他们一样小气。不幸，第2年年中，高里奥先生竟证实了关于他的蓝言，要求搬上3楼，善诉费减为900法郎。他需要极度准节。
Among the most despicable habits of villains is the assumption that others are as stingy as they are. Unfortunately, at the end of the second year, Mr. Goriot confirmed the rumors about him and asked to move to the 3rd floor, and the board and lodging fee was reduced to 900 francs. He needs extreme frugality.
甚至整整1栋屋里没有生火。福盖寡妇要他先付后住，高里奥答应了，从此他便管他叫高老头。关于他降级的原因，大家议论纷纷，可是始终猜不透。像那贾伯爵夫人所说的
There wasn't even a fire in the house all winter. Widow Walker asked him to pay first and then live in the house. Goriot agreed, and from then on she called him Old Man Goriot. Everyone was talking a lot about the reason why he was demoted, but they could never figure it out. As the fake countess said,
高老头是一个城府很深的家伙，一般头脑空空如也，并且因为只会胡扯而随便乱说的人，自有一套逻辑，认为不提自己私事的人绝没有什么好事。在他们眼中
Old Man Gao is a very deep-rooted guy. People who generally have empty minds and talk nonsense because they can only talk nonsense have their own set of logic and believe that people who don't talk about their private affairs will never do any good. In their eyes.
那么体面的富商一变而为骗子，风流人物一变而为老混蛋了。一会儿，照那个时代搬入公寓的福托冷的说法，高老头是做交易所的，送完了自己的钱，还在那里靠公债做些小小的投机。
Then a respectable wealthy businessman suddenly turns into a liar, and a romantic person turns into an old bastard. Suddenly, according to the words of Vautrin, who moved into the apartment at that time, Goriot was doing business on the exchange. After giving away his own money, he was still doing some small speculation on public debt there.
这句话在福托冷嘴里用的是有声有色的金融上的术语。一会儿他是个骑马赌鬼，天天晚上去碰运气，赢他10来个法郎；一会儿他又是特务警察雇用的密探。
This sentence, used in Vautrin's mouth, is a vivid financial term. Suddenly, he was a bad gambler, trying his luck every night and winning about 10 francs. Suddenly, he was an agent in the employ of the secret police.
但福托冷认为他还不够狡猾当这个差事。又有一说，高老头是个放印子钱的守财奴，再不然是一个追同好讲劝的人。总之，大家把他当作恶劣的嗜好，无耻、低能。
But Vautrin thought he was not cunning enough for the job. There is another saying that Old Man Goriot is a miser who makes loan sharks, or else he is a person who chases lottery tickets with the same number. In short, everyone regards him as a bad hobby, shameless, and imbecile.
所能产生的最神秘的人物。不过，无论他的行为或恶劣的嗜好如何要不得，人家对他的敌意还不至于把他撵出门外。他从没欠过房饭钱，况且他也有他的用处。
The most mysterious character that could ever be produced. But no matter how outrageous his behavior or bad habits, the hostility toward him was not enough to drive him out. He never owed room and board. Besides, he also has his uses.
每个人快乐的或恶劣的心绪都可用打趣或咕噜的方式借他来发泄。最近似而被众人一致认可的意见是福盖太太的那种说法，这个保养的那么好，一点毛病都没有。
Everyone can use him to vent their happy or bad moods by joking or grunting. The most recent and unanimously accepted opinion is that of Madame Walker. This one has been so well maintained and has no faults at all.
还能给一个女人许多快乐的人，据他说，实在是个古怪的好色鬼。覆盖寡妇的这种坏话，有下面的事实做根据。那个灰骑行伯爵夫人白吃白住了半年，溜掉以后几个月。
A man who can also give a woman a lot of happiness, according to her, is really a weird and lecherous ghost. The bad words about widow guys are based on the following facts. The unlucky countess lived and ate for half a year, and then ran away for a few months.
覆盖太太一天早上起身之前，听见楼梯上有抽衣吸锁的声音，一个年轻的女人轻轻巧巧地溜进高里奥房里，打开房门的方式又像有暗号似的。胖子谢尔维立即上来报告女主人。
Before Madame Walker got up one morning, she heard the sound of silk clothes rustling on the stairs. A young woman slipped into Goriot's room gently and deftly, opening the door as if there was a signal. Fat Sylvie immediately came up to report to the hostess.
说有个漂亮的不像良家妇女的姑娘，装扮的神仙似的，穿着一双毫无灰土的薄底呢靴，像鳗鱼一样从街上一直溜进厨房，问高里奥先生的房间在哪儿。
It was said that there was a girl who was too beautiful to be a good woman, dressed up like a fairy, wearing a pair of thin-soled woolen boots without dirt, and slipped like an eel from the street to the kitchen and asked where Mr. Goriot's room was.
覆盖太太带着厨娘去凑在门上偷听，耳朵里略到几句温柔的话，两人会面的时间也有好一会。高里奥送女客出门，胖子谢尔维马上抓起菜篮，装作上菜市的模样去跟踪这对情人。
Madame Walker took the cook and listened at the door, and heard a few gentle words. The two met for a long time. Goriot saw the female guest out, and the fat Sylvie immediately grabbed the food basket and pretended to be at the market to follow the lovers.
他回来对女主人说：“太太，高里奥先生一定钱多的作怪，才撑得起那样的场面。你真想不到，吊行街转角有一辆漂亮马车等在那里，我看他上去的。吃晚饭的时候。”
She came back and said to the hostess, Madam, Mr. Goriot must have a lot of money to be able to support such a scene. You really don't expect that there is a beautiful carriage waiting there at the corner of Hanging Street. I saw her getting up. While having dinner.
覆盖太太却拉了一下窗帘，把射着高里奥眼睛的那道阳光遮掉。高里奥先生，你阳光高照，艳福不浅呢。他说话之间暗指他早晨的来客。下，你眼力真好，她漂亮得很啊。那是我的女儿呢。
Madame Walker went to draw the curtains to block the sunlight that hit Goriot's eyes. Mr. Goriot, you are so sunny and blessed, she said, alluding to his morning visitor. Scare. You have such good eyesight. She is so beautiful. That's my daughter.
他回答时那种骄傲的神气，房客都以为是老人故意遮面子。1个月以后，又有一个女客来拜访高里奥先生。他女儿第一次来是穿的晨装，这次是晚餐以后穿得像要出去应酬的模样。
The proud look in his answer made the tenants think that the old man was deliberately trying to hide his face. A month later, another female visitor came to visit Mr. Goriot. The first time his daughter came, she was wearing morning clothes. This time, after dinner, she was dressed as if she was going out to socialize.
房客在客厅里聊天，瞥见一个美丽的金发女子，瘦瘦的身腰，极有风韵，那种高雅大方的气度，绝不可能是高老头的女儿。哎呀，竟有2个！胖子希尔维说，他完全认不出是同一个人。
The tenants were chatting in the living room and caught a glimpse of a beautiful blonde woman with a thin waist and extremely plump figure. Her elegant and generous demeanor could never be the daughter of old man Goriot. Oh. There are 2 of them, said the fat Sylvie. She could not recognize the same person at all.
过了几天，另外一个女儿，高大结实，深色皮肤，黑头发，配着炯炯有神的眼睛，跑来见高里奥先生。哎呀，竟有3个！希尔维说，这第2个女儿初次也是早上来的。
A few days later, another daughter, tall, strong, dark-skinned, black-haired, with bright eyes, came to see Mr. Goriot. Oh. There are 3 of them, said Sylvie. This second daughter also came in the morning for the first time.
隔了几天，又在黄昏时穿了跳舞衣衫，坐了车来。哎呀，竟有4个！福盖太太和希尔维一起嚷着，他们在这位阔太太身上一点没有看出她上次早晨穿扮朴素的影子。
A few days later, at dusk, I put on my dancing clothes and came by car. Oh. There are 4 of them, cried Madame Walker and Sylvie at the same time. They saw in the rich lady nothing of the sober dress she had worn the previous morning.
那时，高里奥还付着1200法郎的善诉费。福盖太太觉得一个富翁养4、5个情妇是挺平常的，把情妇充作女儿也很巧妙。他把他们叫到公寓里来，他也并不生气。
At that time Goriot was still paying 1,200 francs for board and lodging. Madame Walker thought it was quite common for a rich man to have 4 or 5 mistresses, and it was also very clever to use his mistress as his daughter. She wasn't angry when he called them into the apartment.
可是那些女客既然说明了高里奥对她冷淡的原因， 他在第2年年初便换他做老熊猫。等到他降级到900法郎之后，有一次他看见这些女客之中的一个下楼。
But since those female guests explained the reason for Goriot's indifference to her, she called him Old Tomcat at the beginning of the 2nd year. After he had been demoted to 900 francs, she once saw one of these ladies coming downstairs.
就恶狠狠地问他打算把他的公寓当作什么地方。高老头回答说，这位太太是他的大女儿。你女儿有2、3打吗？福盖太太尖刻地说，我只有2个。高老头答话的口气非常柔和。
She asked him viciously what he planned to use her apartment as. Old man Goriot replied that this lady was his eldest daughter. Do you have 2 or 3 dozen of your daughters? Said Madame Walker acidly. I only have 2, old man Goriot replied in a very soft tone.
正如一个落难的人，什么贫穷的委屈都受得了。快满第3年的时候，高老头还要节省开支，搬上4层楼，每个月的房饭钱只有45法郎了。他戒掉了鼻烟，打发了理发匠。
Just like a person in trouble, he can bear all the grievances of poverty. When he was about to reach his 3rd year, Goriot had to save money and moved to a 4th floor. His monthly accommodation and food expenses were only 45 francs. He gave up snuff and sent his barber to work.
头上也不再铺粉。高老头第一次不铺粉下楼，房东太太大吃一惊，直叫起来。他的头发原是灰中带绿的烟渣颜色，他的面貌被暗中的忧患磨得一天比一天难看。
No more powder on my head. The landlady was shocked and screamed when old man Goriot came downstairs without powder for the first time. His hair was originally a grayish-greenish color. His face was becoming more and more ugly day by day, worn by secret sorrow.
似乎成了饭桌上最忧郁的一张脸。如今是毫无疑问了，高老头是一个老色鬼。要不是医生本领高强，他的眼睛早就保不住，因为治他那种病的药品是有副作用的。
He seemed to be the most melancholy face at the dinner table. There is no doubt now, old man Goriot is an old pervert. If it weren't for the doctor's skill, his eyes would not have been saved long ago, because the medicines used to treat his disease have side effects.
他的头发所以颜色那么丑恶，也是由于他纵欲无度和服用那些使他继续纵欲的药物之故。可怜虫的精神与身体的情形，使那些无稽之谈显得早早有据。漂亮的被褥衣物用旧了。
The ugly color of his hair was also due to his excessive sexual indulgence and the drugs he took that allowed him to continue his sexual indulgence. The poor creature's mental and physical condition gave a solid foundation to those nonsense. The beautiful bedding and clothing are worn out.
他买14筒子1码的棉布来代替。金刚钻、金烟匣、金链条、饰物一样一样的不见了。他脱下宝蓝大褂跟那些华丽的服装，不分冬夏，只穿一件栗色粗呢大褂、羊毛背心、灰色毛料长裤。
He bought 14 coppers a yard of cotton cloth instead. Diamonds, gold cigarette cases, gold chains, and ornaments were all missing. He took off his sapphire blue coat and those gorgeous clothes, regardless of winter or summer, and only wore a maroon duffel coat, woolen vest, and gray woolen trousers.
他越来越瘦，腿肚子掉了下去。从前因心满意足而肥胖的脸，不知打了多少皱茧，脑门上有了沟槽，牙床骨凸了出来。他住到圣日内维新街的第4年上，完全变了样。
He is getting thinner and thinner, and his calves have dropped. His face, which was fat from contentment in the past, has countless wrinkles. There are grooves on his forehead, and his gum bones are protruding. During the 4th year of his stay in the Rue Neuve Sainte-Geneviève, he was completely changed.
62岁时的面条商，看上去不满40，又胖又肥的小财主，仿佛不久才荒唐过来，雄赳赳气昂昂，叫路人看了也痛快，笑容也颇有青春气息。如今忽然像70老翁，隆隆中中，摇摇晃晃。
At the age of 62, the noodle seller looked like a fat little rich man who was not yet 40, as if he had just become ridiculous. He was so majestic and high-spirited that passers-by were happy to see him, and his smile was quite youthful. Now he suddenly seemed like a noodle seller. The 70-year-old man is shaking like a dragon.
面如死灰，当初那么生气勃勃的蓝眼睛变了暗淡的铁灰色，转成苍白，眼泪水也不淌了，嫣红的眼眶好似在流血。有些人觉得他可憎，有些人觉得他可怜。
His face was ashen. The blue eyes that were so vibrant at first turned into a dull iron-gray color and turned pale. The tears stopped flowing, and the bright red eye sockets seemed to be bleeding. Some people find him hateful, others find him pitiful.
一般年轻的医学生注意到他下唇低垂，量了量他面角的顶尖，再三戏弄他，而什么话都探不出来之后，说他害着甲状腺肿大。有一天黄昏，吃过饭，福盖太太挖苦他说：“啊，喂。”
Usually young medical students notice that his lower lip hangs down, measure the top of his facial angle, and after teasing him repeatedly but unable to find out anything, say that he has goiter. One evening, after dinner, Madame Walker said sarcastically to him, "Ah, hello."
他们不来看你了吗？你那些女儿？口气之间显然怀疑他做父亲的身份。高老头一听之下，浑身发抖，仿佛给房东太太刺了一针。 有时候来的，他声音抖动地回答：“哎呀，有时你还看到他们。”
Aren't they coming to see you, your daughters? It was clear that he doubted his identity as a father. Upon hearing this, old man Go trembled all over, as if he had given the landlady a stab. Sometimes, he replied with a trembling voice. Hey. Sometimes you even see them.
那班大学生齐声嚷着：“真了不起，高老头！”老人并没听见他的答话所引起的嘲笑，又恢复了迷迷糊糊的神气。光从表面上观察的人以为他老态龙钟，唐使对他彻底认识了。
The college students shouted in unison, "That's amazing, old man Goriot." The old man did not hear the ridicule caused by his answer, and resumed his sleepy demeanor. People who look at him superficially think he is senile. If you get to know him completely.
也许大家会觉得他的身心交瘁是个大大的疑案，可是认识他真是谈何容易。要打听高里奥是否做过面条生意，有多少财产，都不是难事。
Maybe everyone will think that his physical and mental exhaustion is a big mystery, but getting to know him is not easy. It is not difficult to find out whether Goriot is in the noodle business and how much money he has.
无奈那班注意他的老年人从来不走出本区的街坊，老躲在公寓里像牡蛎粘着岩石。至于旁人，巴黎生活特有的诱惑使他们一走出圣日内维新街，便忘记了他们所调侃的可怜老头。
The old people who had no choice but to pay such attention to him never left the neighborhood of the district and always hid in their apartments like oysters clinging to rocks. As for others, the unique temptation of Parisian life made them forget what they were teasing as soon as they walked out of the Rue Saint-Geneviève. The old people who had no choice but to pay such attention to him never left the neighborhood of the district and always hid in their apartments like oysters clinging to rocks. As for others, the unique temptation of Parisian life made them forget what they were teasing as soon as they walked out of the Rue Saint-Geneviève. Poor old man.
头脑狭窄的人和漠不关心的年轻人一致认为，以高老头那种寒仓、那种蠢头蠢脑，根本谈不上有什么财产或本领。至于他称为女儿的那些婆娘，大家都接受福盖太太的意见。
Narrow-minded people and indifferent young people all agreed that with old man Goriot's poverty and stupidity, there was no wealth or ability at all. As for the women he called daughters, everyone accepted Madame Walker's opinion.
像她那种每天晚上以嚼舌为事的老太婆，对什么事都爱乱猜，结果自有一套严密的逻辑。她说，要是高老头真有那么有钱的女儿，像来看他的那些女客，他绝不会住在我4层楼上。
An old woman like her who gossips every night, likes to make random guesses about everything, and the results have a strict logic. She said, if old man Goriot really had a daughter as rich as the female guests who came to see him, he would never live on the 4th floor of me.
每月只付45法郎的房饭钱，也不会穿得像穷人一样的上街了。没有一件事情可以推翻这个结论。所以到1819年11月底，这幕惨剧爆发的时期。
If you only pay 45 francs a month for room and board, you won't go out on the streets dressed like a poor man. Nothing can overturn this conclusion. So by the end of November 1819, the period when this tragedy broke out.
公寓里每个人都对可怜的老头有了极其肯定的意见。他压根不曾有过什么妻儿子女，荒淫的结果使他变成了一条蜗牛，一个人形的软体动物。据一个包饭客人、博物院职员说，
Everyone in the apartment had a decidedly positive opinion of the poor old man. He never had any wives or children. The result of his debauchery was that he turned into a snail, a humanoid mollusk, according to a guest and museum employee.
应当列入加斯格底藩类。跟高老头比较起来，波阿莱竟是阴阳威武，大有绅士气派了。波阿莱会说话，会理论，会对答。虽然他的说话、理论、对答只是用不同的字眼重复旁人的话。
It should be included in the Gasconian category. Compared with old man Goriot, Paul was actually very majestic and gentlemanly. Paul could talk, reason, and answer questions, although his speech, reasoning, and answers were just repetitions of what others said in different words.
但他究竟参加谈话，他是活的，还像有知觉的，不比高老头。照那博物院职员的说法，在寒暑表上永远指着0度。欧也纳特拉斯蒂涅过了暑假回来。
But after all, he participated in the conversation. He was alive and seemed to be conscious, no more than old man Goriot, who, according to the museum employee, always pointed to 0 on the thermometer. Eugene de Rastignac returned from his summer vacation.
他的心情正和一般英俊有为的青年，或是因家境艰难而暂时显得高卓的人一样。接遇巴黎的第一年，法科学生考初级文凭的作业并不多，竟可享受巴黎的繁华。
His mood was the same as that of a handsome and promising young man or a person who temporarily appears outstanding due to a difficult family situation. In the first year of living in Paris, law students did not have much homework to take the junior diploma, so they could enjoy the prosperity of Paris.
要知道每个戏院的戏码，摸出巴黎迷宫的线索，学会规矩、谈吐，把京城里特有的娱乐搅上瘾，走遍好好坏坏的地方，选听有趣的课程，被得出各个博物院的宝藏。
You need to know the drama of each theater, figure out the clues of the Paris maze, learn the rules and conversation, become addicted to the unique entertainment in the capital, travel to good and bad places, choose interesting courses, and memorize the treasures of various museums.
一个大学生绝不嫌时间太多，他会对无聊的小事情入迷，觉得伟大的了不得。他有他的大人物，例如法兰西学院的什么教授，拿了薪水吸引群众的人。他整着领带。
A college student never has too much time. He will be fascinated by trivial things and find them extremely great. He had his big shots, some professor at the Collège de France, people who were paid to attract crowds. He straightened his tie.
对喜歌剧院楼厅里的妇女搔首弄姿，一样一样的入门以后，他就脱了壳，扩大眼界，终于体会到社会的各阶层是怎样交错起来的。大太阳的日子，在天野大道上浮凑成型的车马。
He flirted with the women in the lobby of the Opera Comique. After getting started in the same way, he shed his shell, expanded his horizons, and finally realized how the various social strata are intertwined. On a sunny day, there are rows of carriages and horses on a mono avenue.
他刚会欣赏，跟着就眼红了。欧也纳得了文学士和法学士学位，回乡过暑假的世界已经不知不觉经过这些学习，童年的幻想，内地人的观念完全消灭了。见识改换，雄心奋发之下。
He just started to appreciate it, and then he became jealous. Eugene received his Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Laws degrees, and during the summer vacation in his hometown, he had already gone through these studies without realizing it. The illusion of childhood and the concept of mainlanders were completely eliminated. With a change of knowledge and a strong ambition.
他看清了老家的情形，父亲、母亲、2个兄弟、2个妹妹和一个除了养老金外别无财产的姑母，统统住在拉斯蒂涅家小小的田地上，年收3000法郎左右的田，尽管并没把握。
He saw clearly the situation in his hometown. Father, mother, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and an aunt who had no property except a pension, all lived on the small farmland of the Rastignac family. The annual income from the field is about 3,000 francs, but the income is not guaranteed.
因为葡萄的行情跟着酒市上落，可是每年总得凑出1200法郎给他。家里一向为了疼他而满起的常年窘迫的景象，他把小时候觉得那么美丽的妹妹。
Because the price of grapes fluctuates with the wine market, he still has to give him 1,200 francs every year. The perennial embarrassment that his family had always concealed in order to love him, he took away his sister who he thought was so beautiful when he was a child.
和他认为美的典型的巴黎妇女所做的比较，压在他肩上的这个大家庭的渺茫的前途，眼见任何微末的农作物都珍藏起来的俭省的习惯，用炸床上的残渣剩子制造的家常饮料，总之。
The comparison with the typical Parisian woman he considered beautiful, the dim future of the large family weighing on his shoulders, the thrifty habit of hoarding any meager crops in sight, the homely drinks made from the residue of the pressing bed, in short.
在此无需一一列举的许多琐事，使他对于权位的欲望与出人头地的志愿加强了10倍。像一切有志气的人，他发愿一切都要靠自己的本领去挣。但他的性格明明是南方人的性格。
There were many trivial matters that need not be listed here, which strengthened his desire for power and his desire to stand out tenfold. Like all ambitious people, he is determined to earn everything by his own ability. But his character is clearly that of a southerner.
临到实行就狐疑不决，主意动摇了，仿佛青年人在汪洋大海中间，既不知向哪方面驶去，也不知把帆挂成怎样的角度。先是他想没头没脑的用功，后来又感到应酬交际的必要。
When it comes to putting it into practice, I feel doubtful and wavering in my mind, just like a young man in the middle of the vast ocean, not knowing which way to sail or at what angle to hang the sail. First, he wanted to study aimlessly, and then he felt the need to socialize.
发觉女子对社会生活影响极大，突然想投身上流社会，去征服几个可以做他后台的妇女。一个有热情有才气的青年，加上倜傥风流的仪表和很容易叫女人着迷的那种健壮的美。
Realizing that women have a great influence on social life, he suddenly wants to join the upper-class society and conquer a few women who can be his backstage. A passionate and talented young man, coupled with a suave and elegant appearance, and the kind of strong beauty that can easily fascinate women.
还愁找不到那样的女子吗？他一边在田野里散步，一边不断转着这些念头。从前他同妹妹们出来闲逛，完全无忧无虑，如今他们觉得他大大的变了。他的姑母特玛西亚太太。
Are you still worried about not being able to find such a woman? He kept thinking these thoughts as he walked in the fields. He used to be completely carefree when hanging out with his sisters, but now they think he has changed a lot. His aunt, Mrs. Teresa Marcia.
当年也曾入宫觐见，认识一批名门贵族的领袖。野心勃勃的青年忽然记起姑母时常讲给他听的回忆中，有不少机会好让他到社会上去显露头角。
At that time, I also went to the palace to meet and met the leaders of a group of famous nobles. The ambitious young man suddenly remembered that his aunt often told him that there were many opportunities for him to stand out in society.
这一点至少跟他在法学院的成就同样重要。他便盘问姑母， 那些还能拉到关系的人是怎么样的亲戚。老姑太太把家谱上的各支各脉想了一想，认为在所有自私的扩亲戚中间
This was at least as important as his achievements in law school. He asked his aunt what kind of relatives he could relate to. The old lady thought about the various branches on the family tree and thought that among all the selfish, wealthy relatives,
特鲍塞昂子爵夫人大概最容易相遇。他用老派的体裁写了封信交给欧也纳，说如果能接近这位子爵夫人，他自会帮他找到其余的亲戚。回到巴黎几天之后，
the Vicomtesse de Beauzant was probably the easiest to get along with. She wrote a letter in an old-fashioned style and gave it to Eugene, saying that if she could get close to the Viscountess, she would help him find the rest of his relatives. A few days after returning to Paris,
拉斯蒂涅把姑母的信寄给特鲍塞昂夫人，夫人寄来一张第二天的跳舞会的请帖代替复信。以上是1819年11月底公寓里的大概情形。过了几天，
Rastignac sent his aunt's letter to Madame de Beauzant, who sent an invitation to a ball the next day in lieu of a reply. The above is the general situation in the apartment at the end of November 1819. A few days passed.
欧也纳参加了特鲍塞昂太太的舞会，清早2点左右回家。为了补偿损失的光阴，勇气十足的大学生一边跳舞一边发愿回去开夜车。他预备第一次在这个万籁无声的区域中熬夜。
Eugene attended Madame de Beauzant's ball and returned home around 2 o'clock in the morning. In order to make up for the lost time, the courageous college students danced and vowed to go back and burn the midnight oil. He was preparing to stay up late for the first time in this silent area.
自以为精力充沛，其实只是见到豪华的场面的冲动。那晚他没有在福盖太太家用餐，同居的人可能以为他要天亮回来，好像他有几次富伯拉杜舞会或奥迪安舞会，丝袜上溅满污泥。
I think I am full of energy, but in fact it is just the impulse to see luxurious scenes. He did not dine at Madame Walker's house that night, and his cohabitants might have thought that he would be back at dawn, as if he had gone to the Plateau Ball or the Odeon Ball several times, and his silk stockings were splattered with mud.
漆皮鞋走了样的回家，克里斯朵夫拴上大门之前，开出门来向街上瞧了瞧。拉斯蒂涅恰好在这时赶回，悄悄地上楼，跟在他后面上楼的克里斯朵夫却闹出许多响声。欧也纳进了卧房。
The patent leather shoes went home in a bad shape. Before he bolted the door, Christophe opened it and looked into the street. Rastignac rushed back at this moment and quietly went upstairs. Christophe, who followed him upstairs, made a lot of noise. Eugene entered the bedroom.
卸了妆，换上软鞋，披了一件破大褂，点起泥炭，急匆匆地准备用功。克里斯朵夫笨重的脚声还没有完，把青年人轻微的响动盖过了。欧也纳没有开始读书，先出神地想了一会。
I took off my clothes, put on soft shoes, put on a shabby coat, lit peat, and got ready to study in a hurry. Christophe's clumsy footsteps were not finished yet, covering up the slight noise of the young man. Eugene did not start reading, but thought for a while.
他看出特鲍塞昂子爵夫人是当令的阔太太之一，她的府邸被认为圣日耳曼区最愉快的地方。以门第与财产而论，她也是贵族社会的一个领袖。靠了特马西阿姑母的力量。
He recognized that the Vicomtesse de Beauzant was one of the richest ladies of the day, and that her house was considered the most pleasant place in the Faubourg Saint-Germain. In terms of family status and property, she is also a leader in aristocratic society. Relying on Aunt Marcia's strength.
这个穷学生居然受到报府的优待，可还不知道这优待的作用多大。能够在那些金碧辉煌的客厅中露面，就等于一纸罚阅世家的证书。
This poor student actually received preferential treatment from Bao Mansion, but he didn't know how effective this preferential treatment was. Being able to show up in those splendid living rooms is equivalent to a certificate of aristocratic family.
一朝踏进了这个比任何社会都不容易进去的地方，可以到处通行无阻。盛会中的并光差影看得他眼睛都花了。他和自爵夫人仅仅寒暄了几句。
Once you step into this place, which is harder to enter than any other society, you can go anywhere without any hindrance. His eyes were dazzled by the sight of shaved hairpins at the grand event. He and the Viscountess only exchanged a few words.
便在那般争先恐后赴此晚会的巴黎女神中，发现了一个叫青年人一见倾心的女子。阿纳斯塔奇·特雷斯多伯爵夫人生得端正高大，被称为巴黎身腰最好看的美人之一。
Among the Parisian goddesses rushing to attend this party, I discovered a woman who taught young people to fall in love at first sight. Countess Anastasia de Resto was tall and upright, and was known as one of the prettiest beauties in Paris.
一对漆黑的大眼睛，美丽的手，有样的脚，举动之间流露出热情的火焰。这样一个女人，照特隆格罗侯爵的说法，是一匹纯血种的马。泼辣的气息并没影响她的美。
A pair of big dark eyes, beautiful hands, shapely feet, and passionate fire in her movements. Such a woman, according to the Marquis de Longlo, is a purebred horse. The pungent aura did not affect her beauty.
身腰丰满圆浑而并不肥胖，纯血种的马，贵种的美人， 这些成语已经开始代替天上的安琪儿、仙女般的脸庞以及新派公子哥早已唾弃不用的关于爱情的老神话。在拉斯蒂涅心目中
The body and waist are plump and round but not fat. Thoroughbred horses, noble beauties, these idioms have begun to replace angels in the sky, fairy-like faces, and old myths about love that have long been abandoned by new-school young men. In Rastignac's mind,
阿纳斯大奇特雷斯多夫人干脆就是一个迷人的女子。她想法在她的扇子上登记了2次，并且在第1次4足5时就有机会对她说：“以后在哪儿跟你见面呢，太太？”
Mrs. Anastasia T. Resto is simply a charming woman. He managed to register it twice on her fan, and during the first quadruple dance he had the opportunity to say to her, "Where shall I meet you next, madam?"
说话之间那股热情冲动的劲儿，正是女人们最喜欢的。森林啊，喜剧院啊，我家里啊，到处都可以。他回答。于是，这南方的冒险家在一场4足舞或华尔兹舞中间可能接触的范围内。
The passionate and impulsive energy when speaking is what women like the most. The forest, the comedy theater, my house, anywhere, she answered. So this southern adventurer was within the range of possible contact in the middle of a quartet or waltz.
竭力和这个动人心魄的伯爵夫人周旋，一经说明他是特鲍塞昂太太的表弟，他心目中的那位贵妇人立刻邀请他说，随时可以上他家去玩。他对他最后一次的微笑。
Try your best to deal with this charming countess. As soon as he was told that he was Madame de Buison's cousin, the lady in his mind immediately invited him to visit her house at any time. She smiled at him for the last time.
使他觉得登门拜访之举是少不了的了。宾客之中有的是当时出名放肆的男人，什么摩棱古、隆格罗、马克谢、特托拉伊、特马塞、阿曲达、宾多、王特奈斯都是自命不凡。
It made him feel that a visit was indispensable. Some of the guests were famous and unruly men at that time, such as Malengu, Longwa, Maxime Tétré, Temasai, Ajitabindo, and Wang Tenace. They were all pretentious.
选喝一时之辈，竟跟最风雅的妇女们厮混，例如勃朗同爵士夫人、特朗日公爵夫人、特盖尔加罗埃伯爵夫人、特塞里奇夫人、特加里里阿诺公爵夫人、法洛伯爵夫人。
The most illustrious people of all time hang out with the most elegant women, such as Dame de Blanket, the Duchess de Lunge, the Countess de Gangaroy, Madame de Cerizzi, and the Gallery. Duchess of Arnaud, Countess of Ferret.
特朗蒂夫人、特埃格勒蒙侯爵夫人、菲尔米阿尼夫人、特里斯多曼侯爵夫人、特埃斯巴侯爵夫人、特摩弗里元氏公爵夫人、格朗里欧夫人。在这等场合
Madame de Lanty, the Marquise de Aiglemont, Madame Firmiani, the Marquise de Listomon, the Marquise de Espa, the Duchess de Movery, Grand Mrs. Leo. On such occasions,
年轻人闹出不通世面的笑话是最糟糕的。拉斯蒂涅遇到的幸而不是一个嘲笑他愚昧无知的人，而是特朗日公爵夫人的情人，特蒙托里夫侯爵，一位淳朴如儿童的将军。
Young people are the worst when they make unreasonable jokes. Fortunately, Rastignac met not a person who laughed at his ignorance, but the lover of the Duchess de Lang, the Marquis de Montriveau, a general as simple as a child.
告诉他特雷斯多伯爵夫人住在海尔特街，年纪轻轻，可想踏进上流社会，饥荒似的想弄一个女人，眼见高门大户已有2处打通了路子。
Tell him that the Countess de Lestos lives in the Rue de Geert. At a young age, I longed to step into the upper-class society, and desperately wanted to get a woman. I saw that a wealthy family had already opened the door in 2 ways.
在圣日耳曼区能够跨进特鲍塞昂斯爵夫人的府邸，在唐塔区能够在特雷斯多伯爵夫人家出入。一眼之间望到一连串的巴黎沙龙，自以为相当英俊。
In the Saint-Germain district, you can enter the residence of the Viscountess de Buisson, and in the Tangda district, you can enter the house of the Countess de Lesto. I glanced at a series of Paris salons and thought I was quite handsome.
足够博取女人的欢心而得到她的帮助与庇护，也自认为雄心勃勃，竟可像江湖卖技的汉子似的，走在绳索上四平八稳，飞起大腿，做一番精彩表演。
Enough to win a woman's favor and get her help and protection. He also considers himself ambitious, so he can act like a martial arts man, walking steadily on the rope and flying his thighs to give a wonderful performance.
把一个迷人的女子当作一个最好的平衡棒，支持她的重心。脑中转着这些念头，那女人仿佛就巍巍然站在他的炭火旁边，站在法典与贫穷之间。在这种情形之下，
Use a charming woman as the best balancing rod to support his center of gravity. With these thoughts running through his mind, the woman seemed to be standing majestically beside his coals, standing between the law and poverty. In this situation,
谁又能不像欧也纳一样沉思遐想，探索自己的前途？谁又能不用成功的幻想点缀前途？他正在胡思乱想，觉得将来的幸福十拿九稳，甚至自以为已经在特雷斯多太太身旁了。
Who cannot think about and explore his own future like Eugene, who cannot embellish his future with the fantasy of success? He was thinking wildly, feeling that his future happiness was very certain, and he even thought that he was already by Mrs. Trestov's side.
不料静悄悄的夜里，忽然哼的一声叹息，欧也纳听了，几乎以为是病人的痰厥。他轻轻开了门，走入甬道，瞥见高老头房门底下有一线灯光，他怕邻居病了，凑上锁孔张望。
Unexpectedly, a sigh suddenly came out in the quiet night. Eugene almost thought it was the patient's phlegm. He opened the door gently, walked into the corridor, and saw a ray of light under the door of old man Goriot's room. He was afraid that his neighbor was sick, so he closed the keyhole and looked around.
不料老人干的是非常可疑，欧也纳觉得为了公众安全，应当把自称为的面条商深更半夜干的勾当看个明白。原来高老头把一张桌子仰倒着。
Unexpectedly, what the old man did was very suspicious. Eugene felt that for the sake of public safety, he should find out clearly what the self-proclaimed noodle seller was doing in the middle of the night. It turned out that old man Goriot had turned a table upside down.
在桌子横档上附了一个镀金的盘和一件好似汤钵一类的东西，另外用根粗绳绞着那些镌刻精工的器物，拼命拉紧，似乎要绞成金条。老人不声不响，用金脉隆起的胳膊靠绳索帮忙。
A gold-plated plate and something like a soup bowl were tied to the rungs of the table. In addition, a thick rope was used to twist the intricately carved utensils, and they were pulled tightly as if they were being twisted into gold bars. The old man kept silent and used his bulging arms to help with the rope.
扭着镀金的银器，像捏面粉一般。哟，好家伙！拉斯蒂涅私下想着，挺起身子站了一会。他是一个贼，还是一个窝赃的？是不是为了遮人耳目，故意装疯作傻，过着叫画子般的生活？
Twisting the gold-plated silverware is like kneading flour. Yo! What a guy! Rastignac thought to himself and stood up straight for a while. Is he a thief or a thief? Is he deliberately pretending to be crazy and living a beggar-like life in order to cover up people's eyes?
大学生又把眼睛凑上锁孔，只见高老头解开绳索，拿起银块，在桌上铺了一条毯子，把银块放在上面卷滚，非常利落地搓成一根条子。条子快搓成的时候，欧也纳心上想。
The college student put his eyes on the keyhole again, and saw old man Goriot untying the rope, picking up the silver block, spreading a blanket on the table, rolling the silver block on it, and rolling it into a strip very neatly. When the bars were about to be rolled, Eugene thought to himself.
难道他力气跟波兰王奥古斯德一样大吗？高老头伤心地瞧了瞧他的作品，掉下几滴眼泪，吹灭蜡烛，躺上床去，叹了一口气。欧也纳思忖道：“他疯了，可怜的孩子。”高老头忽然叫了一声
Is he as strong as Augustus, king of Poland? Old man Goriot looked at his work sadly, shed a few tears, blew out the candles, lay down on the bed, and sighed. Eugene thought to himself, he is crazy. Poor child. Old man Gao suddenly shouted.
听到这一句，拉斯蒂涅认为这件事还是不声张为妙，觉得不该冒冒失失断定邻居是坏人。他正要回房，又听见一种难以形容的声音，大概是几个穿不底鞋的人上楼梯。
Upon hearing this, Rastignac thought it would be better to keep the matter quiet, and felt that he should not rashly conclude that his neighbor was a bad person. He was about to go back to his room when he heard an indescribable sound. It was probably a few people wearing cloth-soled shoes going up the stairs.
欧也纳侧耳细听，果然有两个人不同的呼吸，既没有开门声，也没有脚步声。忽然3楼扶脱冷的屋内露出一道微光，一所公寓里竟有这么些怪事。他一边想，一边走下，积极听着。
Eugene listened carefully, and sure enough, there were two people breathing differently. There was no sound of opening the door or footsteps. Suddenly, a faint light leaked out of Vautrin's room on the 3rd floor. There are so many strange things happening in an apartment, he thought as he walked down a few stairs and listened.
居然还有洋钱的声音。一会儿灯光灭了，没有开门的声音，却又听到两个人的呼吸。他们慢慢的下楼，声音也就跟着低下去。谁呀？福盖太太打开卧房的窗子问。是我回来哦，福盖妈妈。
There was actually the sound of foreign money. For a moment, the lights went out and there was no sound of the door opening, but the breathing of two people was heard again. They slowly went downstairs, and their voices became lower. Who is it? Asked Madame Walker, opening her bedroom window. I'm back, Mother Walker.
福托冷大声回答。真怪。欧也纳回到房内想，克里斯朵夫明明把大门上了栓，在巴黎真要通宵不睡才弄得清周围的事。这些小事打断了他关于爱情的幻想，他开始用功了。可是
Vautrin answered loudly. How strange, thought Eugene as he returned to his room. Christopher has clearly bolted the door. In Paris, he really had to stay up all night to understand what was going on around him. These little things interrupted his fantasies about love, and he began to study. But
他先是猜疑高老头，心思乱了，而打扰的更厉害的是特雷斯多太太的面貌不时出现，仿佛一个预告幸运的使者。结果他上床睡熟了。 年轻人发狠，要在夜里读书。
At first he was suspicious of old man Goriot, and his mind was confused. What disturbed him even more was that Mrs. Trestov's face appeared from time to time, like a messenger announcing good luck. As a result, he went to bed and fell asleep. The young man was determined to study at night.
十有九夜是睡觉完事的，要熬夜，一定要过20岁。第二天早上，巴黎浓雾蔽天，罩住全城，连最准时的人也弄错了时间。生意上的约会全失误了，中午12点，大家还当是8点，9点半。
9 times out of 10, you sleep and get the job done. To stay up late, you must be over 20 years old. The next morning, Paris was covered with thick fog, covering the whole city, and even the most punctual people got the time wrong. All the business appointments went wrong. At 12 noon, everyone thought it was 8 o'clock. 9:30.
福盖太太在床上还没动弹，克里斯朵夫和胖子希尔维也起迟了，正在消消停停地喝他们的咖啡，里面掺着从房客的牛奶上撩起来的一层乳汁。希尔维把牛乳放在火上浸煮。
Madame Walker remained in bed still. Christophe and the fat Sylvie also got up late and were drinking their coffee, which was filled with a layer of cream lifted from the tenant's milk. Sylvie put the milk on the fire and boiled it.
叫福盖太太看不出他们开油的痕迹。克里斯朵夫把第一块烤面包浸在咖啡里，说道：“喂，希尔维，你知道福托冷先生是个好人，昨晚又有2个客人来看他。太太要有什么疑心？”
Madame Walker could not see the traces of their taking advantage of her. Christophe dipped the first piece of toast into the coffee and said, "Hey, Sylvie, you know that Vautrin is a good man. 2 more guests came to see him last night. What should Madame have to be suspicious of?"
你一个字都别提。他有没有给你什么？5法郎算本月份的赏钱，意思叫我不要声张。希尔维回答：“除了他跟古的太太舍得花钱以外，旁的都想把新年里右手给的左手拿回去。”哼。
Don't say a word about it. Did he give you anything? 5 francs, counting as this month's reward, means that I should keep quiet. Sylvie replied, except for him and Gu's wife who are willing to spend money, everyone else wants to take back what they gave their right hand to their left hand in the new year. Snort.
他们给的也是天晓的。克里斯朵夫接着说：“1块骑马洋钱5法郎。高老头自己擦皮鞋擦了2年了。波阿莱那小气鬼根本不用鞋油，大概他宁可吞在肚里，舍不得查他的破靴子。”
God knows what they gave. Christopher continued. At least 1 piece of foreign money, 5 francs. Old man Goriot has been polishing his own shoes for 2 years. That stingy Poiret didn't use shoe polish at all. He probably would rather swallow it than put it on his worn-out boots.
至于那瘦小的大学生，他只给2法郎，2法郎还不够我买鞋刷，临了他还卖掉他的旧衣服，真是没出息的地方。希尔维一小口一小口喝着咖啡，话得说回来。
As for the skinny college student, he only gave him 2 francs. 2 francs were not enough for me to buy a shoe brush, and in the end he even sold his old clothes. What a useless place. Sylvie took a sip of coffee and said, "Let's get back to it."
咱们这个还算这一区的好差事里。哎，克里斯朵夫，关于福托冷先生，人家有没有对你说过什么？怎么没有？前几天街上有位先生和我说，你们那里住着一位鬓角染黑的胖子，是不是？
Ours is considered a good job in this area. Hey, Christophe, did anyone say anything to you about Vautrin? Why not? A few days ago, a gentleman on the street said to me, "There is a fat man living there with black temples, right?"
我回答说，不，先生，他并没有染鬓角，他那样爱寻快活的人才没有这个闲工夫呢。我把这个告诉了福托冷先生，他说，伙计，你对付得好，以后就这样说吧。顶讨厌是给人家知道我们的缺点。
I replied, "No, sir. He didn't dye his sideburns. A person like him who loves to seek happiness does not have such leisure time." I told this to Mr. Vautrin, and he said, "Man, you handled it well. Let's just say this from now on. What I hate the most is letting others know about our shortcomings."
娶起亲来不麻烦吗？也有人在菜市上哄我，要知道我有没有看见他穿衬衫。你想好笑不好笑？希尔维忽然转过话头，哟，华特格拉斯已经敲9点3刻了，还没一个人动弹。啊，喂
Isn't it troublesome to get married? Someone also coaxed me at the vegetable market to know if I saw him wearing a shirt. You want it to be funny or not? Sylvie suddenly changed her subject. Yo. Walter Glass had struck 9:15, and no one had moved yet. Hello.
他们都出去了。古的太太同他的小姑娘8点钟就上圣，丹地安拜老天爷去了。高老头携着一个小包上街了。大学生要10点钟上完课才回来。我打扫楼梯的时候看他们出去的。
They are all out. Madame Couture and her little girl went to St. Danchin at 8 o'clock to pay their respects to God. Old man Go took to the street carrying a small bag. College students don't come back until they finish their classes at 10 o'clock. I watched them go out while I was cleaning the stairs.
我还给高老头的小包裹撞了一下，硬得像铁。这老头究竟在干什么呢？旁人要弄他当作陀螺一样，人倒是挺好的，比他们都强。他不给什么钱，可是我替他送信去的地方。
I also gave old man Goriot small package a bump, and it was as hard as iron. What on earth is this old man doing? Others want to play tricks on him, just like a spinning top, but he is actually quite good, better than them all. I also gave old man Goriot small package a bump, and it was as hard as iron. What on earth is this old man doing? Others want to play tricks on him, just like a spinning top, but he is actually quite good, better than them all. He didn't give me any money, but I sent the letter to the place for him.
那班太太酒钱给的很阔气，穿也穿得漂亮，是他所说的那些女儿吗？统共有一打吧。我一向只去过2家，就是到这儿来过的2个。太太起来了，一忽儿就要叫叫嚷嚷的，我该上去了。
That wife paid her generously for drinks and dressed nicely. Are they the daughters he mentioned, huh? There are a dozen in total, right? I have only been to 2 of them, the 2 that have been here. Madam, get up. There will be a lot of yelling in a moment. I should go up.
你当心着牛奶，克里斯朵夫仔细那望。希尔维走进女主人的屋子。怎么？希尔维，已经10点差1刻了，你让我睡得像死人一样，真是从来没有的事。那是浓雾作怪，浓得用刀劈也劈不开。
Watch out for the milk, Christoph, and watch out for the cat. Sylvie walked into the hostess's house. What? Sylvie, it's 9:45 and you've made me sleep like a dead man. This has never happened before. It was caused by thick fog, so thick that it couldn't be cut with a knife.
中饭怎么了？哦，那些房客都见了鬼，一太早就滚出去了。说话要清楚，希尔维，应该说一大早。哦，太太，你要我怎么说都可以。包你10点钟有饭吃。米须诺跟波阿莱还没动弹，只有他们俩在家。
What happened to lunch? Vomit. Those tenants saw the ghost and got out too early. Speak clearly, Sylvie. I should say early in the morning. Oh. Madam, you can say whatever you want me to say. I guarantee you will have food at 10 o'clock. Mykono and Pole haven't moved yet. They are the only 2 at home.
睡得像猪一样。希尔维，你把他们2个放在一块讲，好像什么？希尔维大声嗤笑起来。2个不是一双吗？真怪，希尔维，昨夜克里斯朵夫把大门上了栓，怎么福托冷先生还能进来？
Sleeping like a pig, Sylvie. If you put the 2 of them together, it seems like what? Sylvie laughed loudly. Aren't the 2 a pair? It's strange, Sylvie. Christoph bolted the door last night. How come Mr. Vautrin can still come in?
不是的，太太，他听见福托冷先生回来，下去开门的。你当做，把短袄给我，快去弄饭。剩下的羊肉再加些番薯，饭后点心用煮熟梨子，挑2个小钱1个的。过了一会，福盖太太下楼了。
No, ma'am. He heard M. Vautrin coming back and went down to open the door. You think? Give me your short coat and go get some food quickly. Add some sweet potatoes to the remaining mutton. Use boiled pears for dessert after the meal. Choose 2 small ones each. After a while, Madame Walker came downstairs.
他的猫刚刚一脚掀开罩盆，急匆匆地试着牛奶。尼斯蒂格里，他叫了一声，猫逃了，又回来，在他腿边撕磨。好，你拍马屁，你这老畜生！他接着又叫希尔维。什么事啊，太太？你瞧。
Her cat had just opened the basin and licked the milk hastily. Miss Stigry, she cried, and the cat ran away and came back to rub against her legs. Okay, you flatter me, you old beast. Then she called, Sylvie. Hey, what's the matter, madam? Look.
猫喝掉了多少？都是混账的克里斯朵夫不好，我早告诉他摆桌子，他到哪儿去了？不用急，太太，那份牛奶倒在高老头的咖啡里吧，让我冲些水，他不会发觉的。他对什么都不在意。
How much did the cat drink? It's all bastard Christoph's fault. I told him to set the table. Where was he? Don't worry, ma'am, just pour that milk into Goriot's coffee. Let me pour some water and he won't notice. He doesn't care about anything.
连吃什么都不知道，他上哪儿去了？这怪物！福盖太太摆着盘子问：“谁知道？大概在跟魔鬼打交道吧。”我睡得太多了，福盖太太说。可是太太，你新鲜的像一朵玫瑰。这时门铃一响。
I don't even know what to eat. Where has he gone, this monster? Madame Walker asked as she placed the plate. Who knows? Probably dealing with the devil. I slept too much, said Madame Walker. But madam, you are as fresh as a rose. Then the doorbell rang.
福托冷大声唱着走进客厅，我久已走遍了世界，人家到处看见我呀。哦，你早，福盖妈妈。他招呼了房东，又亲热地拥抱他。喂，放手啊，干嘛不说放肆呀？他回答，说我放肆啊。哦。
Vautrin sang loudly and walked into the living room. I have traveled all over the world for a long time. People see me everywhere. Oh. Good morning, Mother Valker, he greeted the landlady and hugged her affectionately. Hey, let go. Why don't you say it's presumptuous, he replied. Tell me I'm presumptuous. Oh.
我来帮你摆桌子，你看我多好，勾搭褐发和金发的姑娘。爱一阵呀，叹一声，我才看见一桩怪事，全是偶然。寡妇道：什么事？高老头8点半在太子街拿了一套镀金餐具。
I'll help you set the table. Look how good I am. Hooking up with brunette and blonde girls. Love for a while and sigh. I just saw a strange thing, it was all by chance. The widow asked, what's the matter? I'll help you set the table. Look how good I am. Hooking up with brunette and blonde girls. Love for a while and sigh. I just saw a strange thing, it was all by chance. The widow asked, what's the matter? Old man Goriot was at Prince's Street at 8:30 and picked up a set of gold-plated tableware.
走进一家收买旧石器旧肩章的银匠铺，卖了一笔好价钱。亏他不吃这行饭的人，搅出来的条子倒很像样的。真的，当然真的。我有个伙计出远门，送他上了油车回来，我看到高老头。
I walked into a silversmith's shop that bought old tableware and epaulets, and sold them for a good price. Fortunately, he is not a person in this industry, but the strips he wrung out are quite decent. That real? Of course it is. A man of mine went on a long journey. When he came back from a postal car, I saw old man Goriot.
就想瞧瞧是怎么回事。他回到本区格莱街上，走进放印子钱的高伯萨克家。你知道高伯萨克是个了不起的坏蛋，会把他老子的背脊梁雕成头子的家伙，真是个犹太人、阿拉伯人、希腊人。
Just wanted to see what was going on. He returned to the district's Grey Street and walked into the house of Gobsack, the loan shark. You know Gobsack is a great villain, a guy who would carve his father's back into a dice. What a Jew, Arab, Greek.
波西米人，哼，你休想抢到他的钱，他把洋钱都存在银行里。那么高老头去干什么？吃尽当光。福托冷回答。这糊涂虫不惜倾家荡产去爱那些婊子。他来了，希尔维叫着。克里斯朵夫。
Bohemian, well, you can't even try to steal his money. He keeps all his foreign money in the bank. Then what is old man Gao going to do? What to do? Eat it all and take advantage of it. Vautrin replied. This fool is willing to spend all his money to love those bitches. He's here. Cried Sylvie. Christopher.
你上来，高老头招呼佣人。克里斯朵夫跟着高老头上楼，一呼而下来了。你上哪儿去？福盖太太问。替高里奥先生跑一趟。什么东西啊？福托冷说着，从克里斯朵夫手中抢过一个信封，念道
Come up, old man Goriot called to the servant. Christoph followed Goriot upstairs and came down in a moment. Where are you going? Asked Madame Valker. A run for M. Goriot. What is it? Vautrin said, snatched an envelope from Christoph, and read.
送阿纳斯塔奇特雷斯多伯爵夫人。他把信还给克里斯朵夫，问送哪儿呢？海尔特街。他吩咐一定要面交伯爵夫人。里面是什么东西？福托冷把信照着亮处说：钞票。不是的。
To Countess Anastasia de Resto. He returned the letter to Christoph and asked, where to send it? Helter Street. He ordered that the Countess must be met face to face. What's inside? Vautrin said, shining the letter in the light. Bills? No.
他把信封拆开一点，是一张债务清戚的借票。嘿，这老妖精倒有义气。他伸出大手摸了摸克里斯朵夫的头发，把他的身体像骰子般咕噜噜地转了几下。去吧，坏东西。
He opened the envelope a little. Oh, it's a loan to settle the debt. Hey. This old goblin is very loyal. He stretched out his big hand and touched Christoph's hair, and moved his body. He spun a few times like a dice and said, Go ahead, you bad guy.
你又好挣几个酒钱了。刀叉杯盘已经摆好，希尔维正在煮牛奶。福盖太太生着火炉，福托冷在旁帮忙，嘴里哼着。我久已走遍了世界，人家到处看见我呀。一切准备停当。
You can earn some more money for drinks. The cutlery, cups and plates have been laid out. Sylvie is boiling milk. Madame Valker is lighting the stove, and Vautrin is helping, humming. I have traveled all over the world for a long time. People see me everywhere, everything is ready.
古的太太和太一帆小姐回来了。这么早到哪儿去了，漂亮的太太？福盖太太问。我们在圣丹蒂安教堂祈祷。今儿不是要去太一帆先生家吗？可怜的孩子浑身哆嗦，像一张树叶。
Mrs. Gu and Miss Taifan are back. Where have you been so early, pretty lady? Asked Madame Walker. We are praying in the church of Saint Etienne. Aren't we going to Monsieur Taifan's house today? The poor child is trembling all over, like a leaf.
古的太太说着，坐在火炉前面，鞋子搁在火门口，冒起烟来。来烤火吧，维多利。福盖太太说。小姐，福托冷端了一把椅子给她，求上帝使你父亲回心转意固然不错，可是不够。
Mrs. Gu said as she sat in front of the fire, her shoes smoking at the door of the fire. Come and warm yourself by the fire, Victory, said Madame Walker. Miss Vautrin brought a chair to her. It is good to ask God to change your father's heart, but it is not enough.
还得有个朋友去教这个丑八怪把头脑醒醒。听说这蛮子手头有300万，偏偏不肯给你一分陪嫁。这年月，一个美人儿是少不得陪嫁的。可怜的孩子，福盖太太接口道。
He needs a friend to teach this ugly creature to wake up. I heard that this barbarian has 3 million on hand, but he refuses to give you a dowry. In these days, a beautiful woman is indispensable for a dowry. Poor child, said Madame Walker.
你那魔王，老子不怕报应吗？一听这几句，维多利眼睛湿了。福盖太太看见古的太太对他摆摆手，就不出声了。军需官的寡妇接着说：“只要我能见到他的面，和他说话。”
Aren't you, the devil king, afraid of retribution? Upon hearing these words, Victory's eyes became wet. Madame Walker saw Mrs. Gu waving her hands and fell silent. The quartermaster's widow continued, as long as I can see her. Come to his presence and talk to him.
把他妻子的遗书交给他也就罢了，我从来不敢冒险从邮局寄去，他认得我的笔迹。哦，那些无辜的女人遭着灾殃，受着欺侮。福托冷这么嚷着，忽然停下，说：“你现在就是落到这个田地。”
Just give him his wife's suicide note and that's it. I never dared to risk sending it from the post office. He knew my handwriting. Oh. Those innocent women are suffering disasters and being bullied, Vautrin shouted, then suddenly stopped and said, You are now in this situation.
过几天让我来管这笔账，包你称心满意。哦，先生，维多利一边说，一边对福托冷又畏怯又热烈地望了一眼，福托冷却毫不动心。倘若你有方法见到家父，请你告诉他。
Let me take care of this account in a few days, and I guarantee your satisfaction. Oh. Sir, Victory said while giving Vautrin a timid yet warm look. Vautrin was unmoved. If you have a way to see my father, please tell him.
说我把父亲的慈爱和母亲的名誉看得比世界上所有的财宝都贵重。如果你能把他的铁石心肠劝转一些，我要在上帝面前为你祈祷，我一定感激不尽。我久已走遍了世界。
It is said that I regard my father's love and my mother's reputation as more valuable than all the treasures in the world. If you can persuade his iron heart, I will pray for you in front of God. I must be grateful. I have traveled all over the world.
福托冷用讽刺的口吻唱着：“这是高里奥、米须诺小姐、波阿莱都下楼了，也许都闻到了肉汁的味道，那是希尔维做来浇在隔夜的羊肉上的。7个同居的人正在互相问好，围着桌子坐下。”
Vautrin sang in a sarcastic tone. At this time, Goriot, Mademoiselle Myconneau, and Paul all came downstairs. Perhaps they all smelled the gravy that Sylvie had made to pour on the overnight mutton. 7 people who live together are greeting each other and sitting around the table.
时钟敲了10点，大学生的脚步也在门外响了。哎，行了，欧也纳先生，希尔维说，今儿你可以跟大家一块儿吃饭了。大学生招呼了同居，在高老头身旁坐下。我今天有桩意想不到的奇遇。
The clock struck 10, and the footsteps of college students also sounded outside the door. Well, that's all, Mr. Eugene, said Sylvie. You can have dinner with us today. The college student greeted his cohabitant and sat down next to old man Goriot. I had an unexpected adventure today.
他说着，加了好些羊肉，搁了一块面包。福盖太太老在那里估计面包的大小。奇遇，波阿莱叫道：“哎，你大惊小怪干什么，老糊涂？”福托冷对波阿莱说：“难道他老人家不配吗？”
As he spoke, he took some mutton and cut off a piece of bread, where Madame Walker was always appraising the size of the loaf. Adventure, cried Pole. Hey! What are you making all this fuss about, you old fool? Vautrin said to Poiret. Isn't he worthy?
太一帆小姐怯生生地对大学生瞧了一眼。福盖太太说道：“把你的奇遇讲给我们听吧。昨天我去富特鲍塞昂子爵夫人的舞会，她是我的表子，有一所华丽的住宅。”
Miss Taifan glanced at the college student timidly. Tell us your adventure, said Madame Walker. Yesterday I went to a ball given by the Vicomtesse de Beaucent, my cousin, who has a splendid house.
每间屋子都铺满了绫罗绸缎，他举行一个盛大的跳舞会，把我乐得像一个皇帝。像黄雀，福托冷打断了他的话。先生，欧也纳气恼地问：“你这是什么意思？”我说：“黄雀。”
Every room is covered with silk and satin. She held a grand ball and made me as happy as an emperor, like an oriole. Vautrin interrupted. Sir, Eugene asked angrily, what do you mean? I said oriole.
因为黄雀比皇帝快活得多。应声虫波阿来说：“不错，我宁可做一只无忧无虑的黄雀，不要做皇帝。因为……”总之，大学生截住了波阿来的话。我同舞会里最漂亮的一位太太跳舞。
Because the oriole is much happier than the emperor. The yes man Pole said, yes, I would rather be a carefree oriole than an emperor, because. In short, the college student intercepted Pole's words. I danced with the most beautiful lady at the ball.
一位千娇百媚的伯爵夫人，真的，我从没见过那样的美人儿。她头上插着桃花，胸部又是最好看的花球，都是喷香的鲜花。啊哟，真要你们亲眼看见才行。一个女人跳舞跳上了界。
A charming countess, truly, I have never seen such beauty. There were peach blossoms on her head and the most beautiful flower balls on her breasts, all fragrant flowers. Ah! I really need you to see it with your own eyes. A woman dances energetically.
真是难话难描。哎，哪知今儿早上9点，我看见这位神仙似的伯爵夫人在格莱街上走。哦，我的心跳了，以为她上这儿来。福托冷对大学生深深地瞧了一眼。
It's really hard to draw and describe. Well, unexpectedly, at 9 o'clock this morning, I saw this fairy-like countess walking on Grey Street. Oh. My heart was beating fast, I thought. I thought she was coming here, huh? Vautrin looked deeply at the college student.
其实他是去找放印子钱的高伯萨克老头。要是你在巴黎妇女的心窝里掏一下，包你先发现债主，后看见情夫。你的伯爵夫人叫做阿纳斯大奇·特雷斯多，住在海尔特街。
In fact, she went to find the old man Gobsack who loaned loan sharks. If you were to dig into the hearts of Parisian women, you would first find the creditor and then the lover. Your countess is Anastasia de Resto, and she lives in the Rue Girt.
一听见这个名字，大学生瞪着福托冷。高老头猛地抬起头来，把他们俩瞧了一眼，又明亮又焦急的目光叫大家看了奇怪。克里斯朵夫走晚了一步，他到过那儿了。
Upon hearing this name, the college student stared at Vautrin. Old man Gao raised his head.